Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This week we will be covering frequency counts, and this is in chapter 6 of the textbook. We're going to be using frequency counts to look at emotional development. And as always, before I go into the actual method of using a frequency count, I like to give you guys a little bit of background in regards to whatever it is that we're going to be looking for. Again, this week we're going to be looking at emotional development. So, most of you guys have already taken 20, 30, and so many other courses that I'm sure where you guys have discussed temperament and personality. So this is going to be a quick review. Again, temperament is innate. That is something that we are born with, right? In contrast, personality is a mix between our inborn characteristics and the nature, or the nurture or the environment in which we live. So again, because we are looking at social or emotional development, a lot of it has to do with their temperament, right? How or what kind of person are you with others? Remember that our activity level, whether you play a lot as a child, let's say we're a child. If a child is extremely active or likes to lounge around, we all have worked with kids, or we have been our kids ourselves, or have kids, so we know that there's some kids that like to just chill, relax, play video games, or read a book, draw, color. And then there's some kids that sports. My son is very much so an introvert. He likes to be home. This quarantine life is not affecting him one bit. He loves being home. He loves art. He loves to draw. He loves to paint. I have to beg him to go outside. On the other hand, my nephews, they are having such a difficult time with this quarantine because they're used to playing sports, going out all day. So it all has to do with their temperament, right? And of course, their personality. Also, their rhythmicity, regularity, that is also part of temperament. Um, how regular, or um, how much do you need to make sure that your schedule is not broken? Some of us are easy to adapt. If we have something to do at 8 o'clock and it's 7, and then someone cancels it, or um, says that it needs to be rescheduled for a later time or earlier time, if it's not something too important, right, a lot of us will be okay, that's fine, no worries. But some of us will be, no, you can't do that. If it can't be today at 8 o'clock, then it can't ever be at again, right, or at any other time. So it all has to do with your temperament. Also, depending on what temperament you have, are you that kind of person that will approach others? That kind of person that will approach activity? The kind of person who likes to talk to others? So, in other words, an extrovert, right? Or are you more shy, a little more introvert? You're a little more withdrawn. You kind of wait for someone to come up to you and start the conversations or start talking to you rather than you doing so. Adaptability. How adaptive are you to your environments or to people around you? And then your intensity of reaction. I mean, most of us have had experiences working with children, and one of the kids might get a little scratch and they'll shake it off. It's okay, no tears, not even wanting to stop playing because they don't want to waste their time, right? They don't need to be cleaned up, things like that. On the other hand, you have a child who maybe, I don't want to say this word, but a lot of us use it, dramatic, the same fall, same incident, and the reaction will be completely different. And then your threshold of responsiveness, sensitivity to stimuli. And working with toddlers and infants and even up to preschool, especially mostly preschool when they're already potty trained, we often see kids who will go into the restroom and they need to make sure that the lights are on. And we always say, oh, it's fear, but a lot of it has to do with the sensitivity to the stimuli. Also, and in this case, the light would be the stimuli, right? Those kids who cover their ears when there's a loud sound, a loud bang, or to flush the toilet. And then quality of mood. Some people are just easygoing, right? How distracted are you? Or how easily distracted are you? Can you have the music going while you're working? Can you be talking? Can you be writing a paper and talking to people around you? And then your attention span, again, distractibility has a lot to do with that. And your persistence, a lot of it has to do with temperament. My husband is, he doesn't have that much of an adaptability. And he's very distracted. He's distracted easily, and he doesn't persist. If he has a difficult time doing something on the first time, he will give up and he gets upset and he doesn't care who's around, what he's saying, he just does. So for those of you guys who don't remember, the three types of temperament are the easy child or the easy person, right? That person that adapts easily, approaches others. Those are the kids who come to first day of preschool and they're, bye mommy, see you later, and then they see teacher and they're like, hi teacher, how are you? And they're able to follow rules, able to follow routines, schedules. They're able to make friends. That's the easy going. Think of the easy child as that turtle from Nemo, right? And then we have the difficult or negative, or the person who reacts negatively. Okay, that's how sometimes it's referred to, but the difficult person, the difficult child, the that difficult child that shows up on the first day of school and it's kicking and throwing, kicking mom, kicking teacher. I don't want to do this. Why do I have to do this? I don't want to be here. I just want to go home. Why, right? And it can become, he or she can display his temperament, his anxiety, his personalities in a negative way. And then we have the third one, which is the slow to warm. This is the child who's neither easy or difficult, right? This is the child who is both, depending on the situation. But more than likely, this slow to warm child or person usually leans more towards the easygoing or the easy child. A person that's slow to warm up will observe things, will get to know people, will be very cautious, but eventually they will become that easy child and follow routines and schedules just like the easy child. So that's just a quick summary of the temperaments. I hope it brought back some memories. You don't necessarily need to know this for this class. Again, I bring in a lot of my material for my 20 so that it can help those of you who have taken that class long ago or people who have not taken it. So, one of our main goals should be in a preschool to help our kids socialize and be able to figure out how to respond or what emotions to respond with. Okay. It is our responsibility as parents and teachers to help our kids develop an emotional intelligence. That's a type of intelligence that controls emotions in a socially acceptable way. So if you guys think about the goodness of fit, the goodness of fit refers to a child is brought into this world by the parents, right? It is not the child's responsibility to adapt to the parents, but rather the parents' responsibility to adapt to the child. Okay. And at the same time, we develop a synchrony, right? We kind of can figure out what the coos and the babbling sounds that our babies make mean because we have been able to develop that synchrony, that goodness of fit, right? Also, if we look at Erik Erikson, his trust versus mistrust begins at early infancy. As parents, we learn to identify the sounds and the personalities and the temperaments in our children, so then we can exchange emotions, and at the same time that continues to grow, right? And as our kids become a little more independent, about 9 months old, we become that social base for our kids. Our kids will learn how to react in specific situations to specific people depending on how we, the parents or teachers, react. We are their source of social referencing. For example, if you have a baby and you're an introvert, meaning you're shy, you're kind of stick to yourself, you don't kind of, you're not out there looking for conversations, you're just kind of, your own little world. You're out at the park and your child sees that someone is trying to speak to you and you're kind of withdrawing. He or she will learn that that's probably the way he should always react. So as he grows, unless there is other people around him, he or she will learn that that's the way you deal with others. Remember, your temperament is innate, but your personality is a mix of your temperament and your environment. So I'm a little bit of an introvert, but my husband is a extrovert. Okay. He's loud. He likes to talk. He likes to make friends. And my son, he's very much so like me, but my daughter is just like my husband. So again, remember that we are their social reference. So even at school, for those kids who only have contact with their parents and then they come to school for the first time, they are going to refer to the actions and reactions of their teachers so that they can develop emotional intelligence. So I always tell my teachers, you have to think of or remember that these kids are looking at you for guidance in so many ways, not just academic. Okay. Some of the core emotions, these emotions are present at birth. Okay. And this is where from which other emotions evolve. That's joy, love, and happiness. So you're like, how are kids? What do you mean they're present at birth? They are. How do our babies show us that they have joy or that they're happy? Do we always, I wonder how many of you guys have heard the expression, sleep like a baby, eat like a baby, rest like a baby. When you have that baby that's peaceful, that's joy. That baby that smiles and laughs with their parents. Remember back in class we talked about the social smile. That comes at about 6 weeks of age. And then love. Our babies, when they are in our wombs, they understand and they recognize the voices of his or her parents or their siblings. So when the babies come out of the womb, they don't necessarily see everything, but they can hear everything. And it's just having or hearing those voices or those people around them or closer to them makes them develop those connections and those bonds a lot easier. But what about children under stress? Do you believe that these children develop the same emotions? So we've talked a lot about how most of us develop, if you are a typical developing child, you will develop in the same sequence, but maybe at a different time. When it comes to emotions, it's a little bit different. If a child is not shown or love, happiness, joy is not expressed to that child, and that child is learning from us, how is that child going to learn? If we are putting kids under stress, they're definitely not going to develop the emotions or the social skills that most kids who live in a happy or what's the word? Secure environment. Sorry, I had just Then the resilient child. Again, there's not one golden rule, right? So just because a child has never been loved or shown loved to, doesn't mean that that child will never learn to love. The resilient child is a clear example of that. What is a resilient child? A child that succeeds and develops against all odds, right? And then we have anger and aggression. Are they present at birth? Anger is. Have you guys ever seen babies who are so used to getting their food on time and in a certain way, or those babies that like a specific blanket, a specific bottle, a specific binky, and then they get something different? Have you guys seen how they demonstrate their anger? Right? They get upset. Aggression, even maybe not right at infancy, but as toddlers, they can get aggressive, right? And all of these emotions, joy, love, happiness, anger, these are the core emotions. They are present at birth, and these are the emotions from which other emotions evolve. There's four types of aggression. And I think it's very important to remember these and learn about these. Um, we hear a lot the word bullying, right? Bully, 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 bully. But what exactly is the person doing? Let's look at this different types of aggression. So the first one is accidental, undeveloped, undeveloped muscle control, egocentric. So we're talking about infants and toddlers. We know that when they're 2 years old, toddlers is all about them, right? Me, 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 me. It's all about me. They don't know any better. Then we have kids who are even up in preschool who have undeveloped muscle control. What does that mean? Those kids that are clumsy. Have you guys ever worked with kids like, mom, or even at your home, right at home? My son, this is his thing. My daughter, he loves to draw, he loves art, he loves to make his own puppets and sculptures, and he loves paper mache and all kinds of stuff. Well, my daughter, she's 3 and she's a little clumsy. She comes by in his little area where he calls his studio, right? And if she's looking another way, or right now she's into wearing rain boots, she trips and falls easily all the time. Undeveloped muscle control. And oh my gosh, that sets my son on fire. Look what you did. Oh my God. Right? Accidental. A lot of the times when people say bully, bully, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many times parents tell me at least once a week, oh, my son told me that so and so is bullying. How? Why? Tell me exactly. What did he say that he did to him? Oh, he said that he pushed him. Oh, actually, he didn't push him on purpose, and he did apologize. And we talked about it. They were getting in line. He was walking forward, and his shoe fell out, and he fell, and he pushed him. But it was an accident. We cleared it all. We thought we had cleared it all up, but it happens all the time. The second type of aggression is expressive, lack of impulse control, sensory. Again, when we're looking at toddlers and preschoolers, these kids are learning to speak, right? These kids are developing their emotional intelligence. These kids come from different environments, different cultures, from having different relationships with their parents or their siblings. I mean, if you have a child, for example, my son, he's 6 and he has a 3-year-old sister. And then you have another child who has 4 high school aged or middle school aged brothers older. Then at home, my son is the oldest, right? And he's the big boy, the boss. But when he's at school, he's not, because all the other kids have more experience. So my son is not hearing people call him stupid or move away, right? But maybe his friend is. So when that kid says stupid or move out of the way instead of excuse me, my son gets hurt. And this is a true story. So, a lot of the time is just lack of impulse control. Kids are just expressing what they've learned. Now, it doesn't mean or excuse that they don't understand what they're doing. A lot of the kids do know what they're doing. They do know what they mean, but there's some kids that do not. The third one is instrumental, to further goal, get something, rights, privileges, or possessions, right? So this is kids who target or become aggressive towards someone or something for the sole purpose of getting something. So Kids who, let's talk about a toddler, a 2-year-old. Now, a 2-year-old is underdeveloped or undeveloped. They may have some undeveloped muscle control. They may also lack impulse control because of their age, right? But they do understand that they're hurting someone when someone else is crying, if that's explained to them. Sometimes as adults, we're so quickly to ask our kids to apologize. The kid says sorry, but they don't understand why they're saying sorry. We need to explain, hey, Isaac, look at Selena. She's crying. Do you know why she's crying? Oh, because I took her toy away. Well, is that okay for you to just take that toy away? Did you ask her if you could play with it? You hurt her feelings. She was playing with it first. You guys need to communicate. That's why you have words, and that's why she has words, so that you guys can come to an understanding instead of having to hurt one another's feelings or one another's bodies. Once you give that explanation, then you can say, I think it would be a good idea if you ask Selena what you can do to make her feel better. And if Selena says, oh, please say sorry or say sorry, and my son and Isaac says sorry, then great, right? But sometimes kids just say, I just want the toy back. Because we all know as adults that sorry doesn't change anything or solve anything. Sorry sometimes doesn't mean anything, right? And at a very young age, in order to help our kids develop emotional intelligence, we have to tell them these things. We have to be intentional teachers when it comes to things like these. The last one, hostile. And as you can see in the upside down pyramid, it goes from the smaller pyramid to the largest part. You can think of that as the ages too. Accidental, toddlers, infants, toddlers, maybe young threes. And then as you move up, the ages are also moving up. So as the kids get older, they understand most of the time if they are typical, right? Now, if you are dealing with kids who have special needs, this is completely different for them. Whoops. Sorry, I had a glitch in my system. So think of that, okay? It goes from smaller or the least aggressive to older children and most aggressive. The development of conscience plays a big role in temperament and personalities. Again, when you are working with kids, you have to remember that. It is critical. Kids are not born with understanding that conscience. I mean, I can sit here and tell you about stories of all these things that I have heard. Let me just a quick one. One of my nephews, about 5 years ago, when he was just 4, or early 4, yeah, he kicked his brother. And then his mom, my sister, was like, hey, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? And he said, the little voice in my head told me to do so. What was he talking about? His conscience, right? That internal voice that guides moral actions. Now, who helps you develop that? The people around you, right? It's the people around you that help you develop that, because if the people around you don't help you understand or develop an understanding of what's right and wrong, or accepted and not accepted, how will you ever learn that? That's why in a classroom and even at home, we should have schedules, routines, behavior, expectations, and consequences. And then we move on to empathy, intellectual and emotional response to another person's discomfort. So, by explaining to our kids the scenario that I gave you earlier about Isaac pushing Selena, instead of asking Isaac to right away say sorry, I'd rather explain to him why Selena is hurt. And then Isaac and Selena can decide what's going to happen from there. And at the same time, not only am I helping him develop that ability to use his vocabulary, his language to solve issues or problems, right? But I'm also helping him develop empathy. which is I'm trying to help them understand why Selena is crying. What if a child does not have joy? Have you guys ever had a child who shows or demonstrates the inability to show joy? I have been very fortunate that I have not seen a typical developing child who doesn't enjoy laughing or engaging with others, but I have seen what seems like failure or absence of joy in kids who have autism. One of the major symptoms or key elements when it comes to looking at children with autism is the lack of social development or emotional expression. Okay. It seems like they may not have joy, but it's not that. They just don't know how to express it. But if you do have, or if you were to ever see a child, who is not expressing joy, that would be a great big red flag. Most children, if they are typical in this country and most countries, will show joy. Okay. There has been kids from birth who. So when I talk about kids having the inability to express themselves socially or emotionally, especially when we're talking about kids with autism or other disabilities, I don't mean that they won't ever develop the ability to express themselves or that they have the inability to. I just mean that especially when we're working with preschoolers, most of the children, we are their first teachers, so they have not yet been taught to express themselves socially, right? So if you're talking about a child who may have a difficult time expressing themselves verbally, what have you been doing as a parent or as a teacher to help them? What techniques, what strategies have you taught them to use to express themselves appropriately rather than throwing themselves or pointing or whatever it may be? For example, both my kids, Isaac and Selena, both have speech delays. And though I knew they have the speech delay, I didn't just say, okay, well, he can't speak, so I'm just going to let it go. No, I learned a little bit of sign language and I would help them. And they're also bilingual, so there were some words that they were easier for them to say in Spanish and not in English. So whatever I would always say, I would speak to them in both languages and then a little bit of sign language. And then I also had visuals, and I could ask them to point to whatever it is that they needed, but they needed to express that what their needs and wants to me. It wasn't just like grabbing my hand and taking me wherever they needed. They needed to learn that there was more to communication and expressing themselves socially and emotionally rather than just taking that person, because if they're out in public, how are other people going to understand them, right? So that's what I'm referring to when kids who come with autism or other disabilities that come to our classrooms who do not demonstrate joy in that way. So we've been talking about how to provide our kids with that social intelligence or that emotional intelligence. We talked about how kids have that underdeveloped or undeveloped they have that lack of self-control, undeveloped muscle control. Well, one of the reasons why we need to make sure that we are intentional in our modeling and we directly instruct kids how to behave and respond to different situations and to different kids, it's because the executive part of the brain, which is responsible for analyzing, planning, organizing personality and expressing personality and behavior, as well as decision making, the prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to mature. So in other words, teachers and parents of young kids are acting or take the responsibility to become the child's prefrontal cortex. We, the adults, teach our kids how to analyze. We teach our kids how to plan. We teach our kids how to organize and how to express their personalities and their behavior in an appropriate, socially acceptable way. Okay, so in order for our kids to allow us to become their prefrontal cortex, we need to provide an emotional secure environment. Our kids need to know that they can come to us whenever they need us. right? We need to develop a great communication. We need to be able to speak to them just as they can speak to us appropriately and respectfully. And we can do this by providing consistency in our classroom. Again, I've already mentioned it. How do we provide consistency in our classroom? By providing age appropriate routines, age appropriate schedules, age appropriate behavior expectations, and age appropriate consequences, and age appropriate rules. Okay, that's how we can develop and provide our children with an emotionally secure environment. That's when they will allow us to become their executive part of the brain. That's when we will be able to take the role of their prefrontal cortex until later in life they develop or completely develop their prefrontal cortex. Now, when they're toddlers and preschoolers, not that they don't completely, have a lack of prefrontal cortex, it's just that it's just developing. It's not completely matured yet, like ours as parents and teachers. So helping children with emotional expression is a big deal. Okay. Some kids just don't know how to express their needs and their wants. And that's when challenging behaviors arise. A challenging behavior refers to behavior that interferes with learning or social engagement. And when I'm talking about interferes with learning and social engagement, I'm not only talking about the child who's exhibiting the behavior, I'm also talking to about the children in the same classroom. So you might have a child, a class of 23, right? Of 24 children in your preschool classroom. All 23 kids are in the circle time listening to you read a story, but then you have that little one, Johnny, that will get up in the middle of the story reading. He'll start spinning, dancing, maybe even kicking or hurting one of the other children. He's distracting the other kids. He's interrupting your time. He's taking away from learning time, right? So it's not just his time, it's also the other kids. Now, how the 23 kids react to Johnny's behavior will impact whether or not Johnny will continue to express himself in that way. So Johnny's trying to be funny, right? The kids laugh, Johnny's going to keep doing it. Johnny gets up, tries to be funny. There's no consequence from the adults in the classroom. He will continue to do it. Johnny gets up, he's trying to be funny. There's a consequence from the teacher, or the kids don't think it's funny, then he will react in one or two ways. He will either become aggressive towards himself or others, or he will stop. And it is the teacher's responsibility to model and be intentional with the consequences and the routines in order to prevent this from happening. And intervention begins with assessment based on typical developmental behavior. So what can you use? A frequency count. If you have a child, because it's very possible and it's very normal, and it's very, all of us have bad days. If you have a child who is having a bad day, it is normal. It is okay. You're not going to develop intervention strategies for that child that's having a bad day that day. Obviously, you need to have rules and you need to have expectations so that it helps this child cope with whatever it is that he's dealing with. And you need to provide him with different outlets, right, of emotional expression. Verbally is not the only way that you can express emotion. You can paint, you can draw, you can play. You can do so many things. So it is your responsibility as a teacher to have all of these things set in place, available in your classroom, so that when the child has a bad day, you have all of these outlets for them, right? But if you have all these consistency, routines, schedules, all that stuff, and a child is not just having a bad day, that's just a typical child, a difficult typical behavior for this child, and your outlets are not working, then that's when when you start thinking about other interventions. What can intervention be? Talking to specialists, talking to parents, talking to coworkers. Because once you realize that everything that you're doing in your classroom is not working, you need to reach out so that you can prevent more serious social problems later. Again, we have the unique responsibility as preschool or early childhood educators to catch, right? To catch those behaviors that are challenging. Catch those behaviors that may raise red flags. Bullying. What is it? Antisocial, coercive behavior that sets a pattern of aggression. When a child hits one time, that's not bullying. In order to be considered bullying, that child needs to hit repeatedly. Maybe not just the same child, but different children, but constantly, right? So you have little Johnny that goes into your classroom and he hits every single day. But he hits one specific child every single day, or a group of children, of specific children. That's bullying. So it is very necessary and essential for you to educate the parents as well as the students. Because for those of you guys who work with preschool, you guys know that, little Anthony got accidentally pushed down the slide yesterday, and he went and told his mom that he's being bullied at school. Then mom comes to school and angry, right? Obviously, you need to believe your child. Angry because he's been bullied. You ask mom what happened. What do you mean? What did he say? Oh, well, he said that he was pushed down the slide. Oh, he was pushed down the slide, but it was an accident. And we talked, I thought I had cleared it up with him because we sat down with his peer that accidentally pushed him, and he said it was okay. He apologized to him, but he's not being bullied. It is very important for your parents to also understand, and I always recommend to talk to the parents away from the kids, and then if it's necessary to bring the children in. Sometimes I always bring the kids in after I speak with the parents, because sometimes kids are looking for very specific reactions from the parents, but also vice versa. We have some parents who are very needy and also want and seek specific reactions and attention from their kids. So it's always good to get a good look or a good conversation with the parents and then the kids, and then bring it all together to try to figure things out. Oops. Sorry, guys, it's not moving. So helping children with emotional expression, it is very important to, again, become the prefrontal cortex and the positive social referencing that kids are referring to in order to develop that emotional intelligence. It is very critical for us teachers and parents to look out for behaviors that warrant concern for emotional development. So in infants and toddlers, what if you have children who are not smiling, who are not laughing, who are not connecting with anyone around them? Maybe they're not crying when they're hungry. Maybe they're not crying when they're wet, or maybe they're crying too much, right? What if you have children who have a high sensitivity to sounds and noises and maybe even textures of food? And then you have those kids who have a lack of sensitivity. For example, I had a 2-year-old back in the day, about 10 years ago, when I was a site supervisor for an infant toddler program. And it was about 110 degrees outside. And obviously we couldn't go play because it was inclement weather. It was too hot. The minute he got a chance to, he took off his shoes. He didn't like shoes on. And then one day he had his shoes off. It was 110 degrees outside. He looked out for a time for someone to come in the door. And as soon as someone came in the door, he ran out. And he was running around in 110 degree hot weather on barefoot on hot concrete cement, and it didn't bother him at all. He was going down the slide, and obviously we're trying to bring him in, but he's running away from us. By the time we finally got him, inside of the classroom. His little feet were at the bottom, the soles of his feet, super red, and I could see like a little blister coming through. But he just had lack of sensitivity. He also didn't like loud noises, and he only ate very specific foods. Those are all very red flags, huge red flags, in this case, autism. But it can be other things too. Not just, it could be trauma, it could be stress, it could be so many things. It's not necessarily just a disability. Preschoolers, what if you have a preschooler who's hitting, kicking, tantruming every single day? Those are all behaviors that you could look for that would warrant concern. What if you have a child who cries every day, who may seem sad every day, or upset, or has the inability to connect with others in the classroom? Young school agers right now, with all this social media, so many kids who are now threatening to commit suicide. Riverside Unified School District, as well as Alvord Unified School District. I can speak for them because I collaborate with them and work for RUSD. But for the third year in a row, the California Department of Education has given them a grant to make sure that they provide counseling services on all campuses. That's how high the demand is for counseling, because these kids are going through so much. What if you have a child who is seeking the attention? We have 5th graders, 4th graders who are coming to school wearing very short shorts, midriffs, dressing inappropriately. What kind of attention are they seeking? Those are all behaviors. Kids who may seem uninterested in schoolwork, kids who can't connect with others, kids who have said that they have hurt themselves, kids who don't speak, kids who demonstrate a lack of empathy or sympathy, kids who bully. Those are all behaviors that, are concerned for emotional development. What works? Everyone's different. So what works for one child may not work for the next. And it is only a matter of assessing each child. And when I mean assessing, not just the needs of the child, but what is the environment of the child like? How much are the parents or the siblings or the teachers willing to put in for this child? So what works is very, that's the question everyone wants to answer. But unfortunately, different things work for different people. Helping all children, again, with emotional development, including infants and toddlers, especially when infants and toddlers, you want to watch out for behavior that gives clues to sensory integration, organization of sensory information, depending on temperament and the duration of intensity of stimuli. Again, is this child crying too much, or is this child not crying at all? Self-regulation, ability to control reactions to stimuli and behavior. Watch for arousal, attention, effect, and action. If you have a child who, the minute they hear a loud bang, just flip out and start crying and can't handle it and cover their ears or hide under you, whatever it may be. If you try to feed them a specific texture and they vomit, they just can't have it in their mouth. Those are all stimulus. What if you turn on the lights in the classroom and they don't like it? They're like, oh, they're covering their eyes, or you turn off the lights to watch a movie, or set a tone for whatever it may be, and they don't like it. They need to make sure that they have the lights. So when we're talking about sensory, we're talking about the 5 senses, right? Vision, taste, touch, hearing. What else? What did I forget? Vision. Oh, smell, vision, taste, hearing, and touch. So that's what we need to be looking for. Infants and toddlers. How do they react to specific stimulus? What about children with dual language learners? So I shared the example with both of my kids. Both of my kids have speech delays. They're both bilingual, or I'm trying to raise them bilingual. Sometimes using specific words in Spanish is easier than using specific words in English. So what if a child only speaks the one language and knows that he can't pronounce those words? We need to make sure that we provide specific strategies in order to help them express themselves, not verbally, right? So maybe sign language, maybe a communication board, and then emotional development for children with disabilities. This is something, we could have a whole class on teaching emotional development of children with disabilities, depending on the disability, depending on the severity, depending on the therapies and strategies that they have already been exposed to, depending on how involved the parents are and the teachers. There's so many different parts to the equation that it's, I mean, again, we could take another class on just that. But if you guys are interested, special education teachers are in need. There's a lot of need for special education teachers, and RCC offers EAR 40 and 41, I believe, in their special education courses, introduction and internship. If this is a subject that interests you, I would really highly recommend that you look into it. You need to have the heart, and because you need a big heart to work with kids with special needs or with disabilities. So this brings me to using frequency counts. As I've spoken on the previous slides, I'm sure that a lot of you guys started thinking about the instances where you've seen certain behaviors, or have had the opportunity to work with children who display challenging behaviors. Now, when does it become a challenging behavior? If a child, just like bullying, right? If a child just has a bad day, do you necessarily have to go and call the specialist, call a meeting with the parent? No, I mean, obviously you want to talk to the parent and let them know what happened. Hey, today he was not himself. He was having a difficult time playing with peers. He had an accident. He didn't make it to the restroom, whatever it may be. Obviously, it's always good to keep the parents in the loop. But if it's just one day out of 2 months, right, then obviously you wouldn't think about referring to a specialist. Just keep an eye on that child. But if you have a child who frequently, right, just like bullying, has that pattern, it just keeps happening and happening. And then you kind of realize that it's not all day, it's just a certain times of the day. You want to take a closer look at that behavior, right? So how could you do that? By using a frequency count. So what is a frequency count? A frequency count is basically just going to give you an opportunity to gather information on that targeted behavior, that very specific behavior. You're basically literally only counting the incidents or the number of incidents that this behavior occurred or took place in the class. So using this method, using frequency counts is recording. It's a recording method to measure how often a specified event occurs. So let's say, for example, you have a child who bites. You're only looking at the biting instances. How many times and at what times and in what centers and with what children did he bite throughout the day, right? It is a close method. A frequency count is a close method because you don't provide any details. You simply give a tally. That's all you're doing. You're tallying for a specific targeted behavior. Measure the outcomes. So once you figure out how many times a child is biting, you may be able to identify at what time of the day he is biting. You may be able to identify at what center he is biting. You might even be able to identify what child or what lighting or what person is targeting that behavior. You can implement a strategy, right? Whether it's referring to a specialist or maybe making sure that this child doesn't play with that specific peer, or maybe it's a teacher. Let's face it, guys, not all kids will like us. So maybe you're the one that triggers the behavior. So find a different way, maybe transferring the child to a different class or making sure that you work most whole groups, and when it comes to working small groups, that this child works with a different adult in the classroom. So the whole point of tallying or keeping track or counting the number of times that this child bites or hits or whatever it may be, it's just like all other observations, is to develop and implement a strategy to delete that behavior or decrease that behavior. Again, a frequency count is used to document frequently occurring behaviors. So you're not going to bust out a frequency count for anything for any child on any given day. You are going to be using these frequency counts for kids who are displaying or demonstrating, expressing a very specific behavior on different days, most of the time every day, right? That's when you use a frequency count. A frequency count can also be used to measure pro-social and antisocial behavior. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative behavior or a challenging behavior. It can be, you can even look at children who always behave positively, and and do it for that reason. But most of the time, a frequency count is used to identify the number of times a child behaves in a specific way or a targeted way, or demonstrates a targeted behavior. Whoops. Oh, sorry, it wasn't going. So there's a lot of different forms of tallying behaviors. The book recommends this one, which is just very simple. Again, in this case, they're just looking at pro-social and antisocial behavior. They have kind of like the checklist that we just discussed in class. You just have a list of all of your kids in the classroom, and then your pro-social behavior, it's identified there so that you don't have any room for misunderstanding or subjective ideas. You kind of want to be very specific. So on here it says pro-social: helping, sharing, hugging, calling another child by a kind name. And then antisocial, what is it? Hurting, hoarding, bad name calling, rejecting another child. So you want to see, obviously, if you see in this case, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 children, and there was a total of 24 pro-social, and there was a total of 22 antisocial. You're like, wait a minute, that's almost very similar. That's, it should be way more pro-social than antisocial. And then if you look at our friend Edward here, see, Edward has zero pro-social, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 antisocial. And then you have Carol. She has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pro-social, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 antisocial. So it's almost like every time she has a pro-social or an antisocial, she probably counteracts with the pro-social, right? So things like this, you don't necessarily have to look for a specific behavior. If you're just trying to see how well the children are behaving overall, you could very simply conduct a frequency count on all of your kids, and this will give you a lot of data. So for example, me just looking at this, I'm like, whoa, Edward, what's going on? Do I have to do another frequency count tomorrow? Or what were the antisocial behaviors? What exactly did he do, right? If I'm obviously this doesn't give me a lot of detail, but if I was the teacher, I would probably know. And I can conduct another frequency count on just Edward, and then it would give me a lot more detail. And then over here, our friend, let's see, Hui, was he not there? Was he out that day? Is he not engaging with anyone? Is he by himself? Is he an introvert? What's going on? Is he withdrawn? Right? So a lot of things, a lot of information that a simple frequency count can give me. The advantages of a frequency count, it's a quantitative measure, right? A quantitative measurement on which to base strategies for change. Quantitative, another way for numbers, another word for numbers. It simply means numbers, something that you can add, something tangible. And then another advantage is that it's quick to record with no details, just tallies to write, nothing else, just taking tallies. Useful for quantitatively and objectively measuring frequently occurring behaviors. Disadvantages: you lose the raw data with no details recorded. Only measure one kind of behavior, making the results highly selective. Allow the recorder's bias to enter the recording. With any observation that we conduct, it allows for the recorder's bias to enter the recording unless it is very specific. One of the reasons why it's taking me longer to grade the checklist for the physical development is because I'm making sure that you guys were as objective and specific as possible. So once you gather the information on from a frequency count, what do you do with it? Just like all other observations, right? You if it is focused on a child, it can measure the effects of an intervention strategy. It can be filed in the child's folder. If it is on the whole group, it can be a pre and post measurement of an intervention strategy, filed in the class file rather than individual folders, or you can share with the family group a family group as appropriate. So let's go back a little bit to the what if it's a whole group. So let's say that you had a very attractive home center. Everyone wanted to go to the home center, but you realized after doing a frequency count that mostly everyone who went into the home center was having antisocial behavior. So you decide, you know what? I'm going to make sure that only 3 people are in the center at a time. And I'm going to take out some toys, some material, and I'm going to move the center into a wider, bigger area so that there's more room for kids to move around. So you've done the changes. Now you take another frequency count, and you realize that all of the strategies and all of the interventions that you did, which were to make sure that there's only 3 kids in the center, you took out material and you gave it a wider, bigger area for that center. It worked. That's all the kids needed. And that dropped your number of antisocial behavior. It could be as simple as that for a whole class. But what if you have a child who is having a difficult time sharing? Just about every single day, especially when it comes to centers time, someone is complaining that he is not sharing. So you take a frequency count. You observe the child. You make sure that the kids understand. You realize after observing him that kids have just learned that if they tell you that he's not sharing, you won't give him the opportunity to explain himself, and you'll simply make him drop his pen down or sit out for a minute or be your shadow, whatever it may be. So after doing the frequency count, you realize that the issue or the challenging behavior is not the fact that this child is not sharing, but rather that your whole class doesn't understand what sharing means, right? So then there you go. You have found a solution. So for this case, we can't go into the classrooms again. So I have uploaded some videos, and that's where you will be using the videos to complete your observation. Again, my friends, I hope that you guys are staying safe and healthy. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to text me or email me. Everything's going well so far. Again, my plan was to grade everything by Friday. It didn't work out. I have shared with you, some of you guys, but not all of you guys, that my husband works 12-hour shifts, night shifts. So he leaves our home at 5 p.m. and he doesn't come back home until about 8:30 a.m. And of course, he has to sleep to be ready for the next day. So he doesn't wake up till about 4. And I have a 6-year-old that I'm homeschooling and my 3-year-old. So it's a little stressful, but I'm getting it all done. And I hope you guys are patient with me and flexible. And I really appreciate it. And we're getting through this, guys. Okay, best of luck. Again, text me or email me if you need anything. Have a great week. Bye-bye.